My name is Kelly Robinson, and I'm 32 years old. 4 years ago, I heard the sentence that broke me into pieces. Kelly, I'd rather die than have your children. And today, that man just showed up at my son's first birthday party. It's supposed to be a happy day, balloons, cake, laughter, echoing through the park pavilion. My husband Patrick is helping our son Leo open his gifts, his eyes soft and joyful, and then I see him. Lucas, standing by the parking lot holding a box wrapped in shiny paper pretending to smile. My chest goes tight. The sunlight feels suddenly too bright, the noise too sharp. He spots me, starts walking over. I freeze. For a moment, I'm 24 again. Back in that car, staring out the window while my world collapsed. Flashback, 4 years earlier. Lucas and I met through mutual friends at a friend's rooftop party. He was charming, magnetic, the kind of man who seemed to belong anywhere. I was drawn in instantly the way moths always fly straight into the flame that burns them. He said I had old soul eyes. I thought that was romantic. Later I learned it was just something he said to every woman who looked like she felt too much. We started dating soon after. Lucas was confident, ambitious, always planning his next promotion, next car, next vacation. I was working and publishing, modest but content. He liked to tease me about it. You spend your day editing other people's dreams, he'd laugh. At least someone has to make sure they make sense, I'd reply. My family tried to like him. My mom said he was a little polished. My dad said he had eyes that look past people. But I was in love, or something that felt close enough to it. I believed we were building a life together. I helped him move twice, supported him through a career change, and ignored the unease in my chest every time he rolled his eyes at kids running in restaurants. He'd say, "Why do people bring babies everywhere? They're like little noise grenades." I laughed it off, thought he was joking. You learn to excuse cruelty when you're scared of losing affection. It was a Saturday evening in March when everything shattered. Our friends Dave and Kelly had invited us over to meet their new baby girl. I brought flowers. Lucas brought a bottle of wine he'd bragged about all week. The baby, tiny, warm, so full of life, was fussing in Kelly's arms. She looked exhausted. "Want me to try?" I asked gently. Kelly nodded, grateful. The moment I held that baby, something quiet and sacred passed between us. Her tiny hand curled around my finger and I felt my heart expand. Lucas watched me with that tight smile he wore whenever I was too soft. Dave grinned. "Kelly, you're a natural." Kelly sighed with relief. "She likes you. You're going to be such a good mom someday." The room glowed for me in that second. Warm, hopeful. "I hope so," I said. "I've always wanted a family." And then I made the mistake of looking at Lucas wanting to share that moment. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at his phone, jaw tight, pretending to type something important. When we left a little later, I tried to hold his hand. He pulled it away. The silence in the car was thick. Even the radio static seemed afraid to play. Finally, I asked, "Did something happen? You seemed uncomfortable when I was holding the baby." He didn't look at me. "Can we not do this right now?" "Do what I just thought." He turned then sudden and cold. "Kelly, you want to talk about our future. I'll tell you right now, I'd rather die than have your children." The words hit like a physical blow. I laughed at first, thinking I misheard. "What?" He smirked, cruel. "You and your family, you think small. Suburban mediocrity. Little versions of you running around. No thanks." I could barely breathe. My hands trembled against the steering wheel. He kept talking, voice full of mockery. "Do you even know what it's like to want something more than just diapers and PTA meetings? I'd rather cut my own hand off than live that life." It wasn't just that he didn't want kids. He didn't want my kids. He didn't want me. I remember whispering, barely audible, "You really think that little of me?" He laughed softly, unbothered. "I'm just being honest. You should thank me for that." Honesty, as if cruelty became noble when wrapped in that word. I didn't cry, not that night. I sat there in silence until the world outside blurred, then said the only thing that made sense. "Okay." He blinked. "That's it, okay." I nodded. "You've said enough." He slammed the door when we got home, muttering something about me being dramatic. I went inside, brushed my teeth, and lay beside him without saying a word. The pillow beneath me was wet by morning. The next few days he pretended it never happened. He brewed coffee, hummed in the kitchen, asked if I wanted Thai or Italian for dinner, as if his words hadn't carved a hole inside me. But something inside had shifted, something final. I started to see everything through a new lens. Every time he dismissed my ideas, every time he rolled his eyes at my dreams, every moment I'd swallowed discomfort because I didn't want to be too sensitive. He hadn't just insulted my future, he'd exposed who he truly was. Back to the present, the birthday party. Lucas is only a few steps away now. The same carefully styled hair, but thinner. Eyes duller. A smile rehearsed too many times in the mirror. He lifts the box slightly. I brought something for Leo. My heartbeat pounds in my ears. You shouldn't be here, Lucas. His smile falters. I just wanted to, but I don't hear the rest. The sounds fade again. The laughter, the music, Patrick's voice calling my name. Because in my mind, I'm still sitting in that car 4 years ago, hearing the echo of his voice, the one that told me I was unworthy of love, of motherhood, of joy. Only now the difference is clear. He was wrong. I have all of it, and more. The woman I used to be died that night, but the one who rose from her ashes, she built a life he could never imagine. The morning after that night, sunlight spilled across our apartment like it always did, warm and golden, pretending everything was still okay. Lucas was in the kitchen, whistling. The smell of coffee filled the air, that same vanilla roast I used to love. He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Morning, you want toast?" As if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't gutted me with words I could never unhear. I sat there at the table, staring at him. The man who had just told me that the idea of having my children disgusted him was now buttering toast. The world tilted a little that morning. I realized something cruel and liberating at once. He didn't regret saying it. He just didn't care. That week, he was unusually cheerful, cracking jokes, making plans, even sending me links for vacations we'd once dreamed of taking. It was like watching a stranger play a role that used to belong to someone I loved. But every sound, every laugh felt hollow. The silence after his voice was louder than any argument. I went to work, but the words on the page blurred. I'd edit entire paragraphs and not remember a single sentence. My coworkers noticed. My boss asked if I was sick. I wasn't sick, I was disappearing. At night, I'd lie awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship like a crime scene. The little things I'd once thought were quirks now looked like warning signs. How he'd always corrected me in public. How he'd joke about my sentimental little dreams. How he'd sigh when I talked about my family. And yet I'd loved him. I'd believed I was lucky to have someone driven. It took me years to realize being loved by someone who looks down on you is just another way of being alone. One Thursday evening, Lucas went out for drinks with his coworkers. He didn't notice the packed suitcase in the corner. I spent that night folding what little dignity I had left into a single bag. I took my clothes, my old journals, my grandmother's ring. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the dishes could stay. They belonged to a version of me I no longer wanted. Before I left, I placed a note on the kitchen counter. It said only, "I hope you find what you're chasing." I locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the keys. When the elevator doors closed, I let myself cry for the first time. Quietly. No screaming, no dramatic sobs, just the sound of something fragile snapping in half. The next few months were strange. Silence, then noise, then silence again. Lucas called from different numbers, left voicemails. "We should talk. You're overreacting. I didn't mean it like that." I didn't answer any of them. I'd already heard everything that mattered. Mutual friends asked what happened. I said simply, "We wanted different things." That was true. I wanted a future built on love. He wanted a mirror that never showed him his flaws. Loneliness has a particular sound. It's the hum of your own breathing in a quiet apartment. The echo of your footsteps when no one answers your "I'm home." But it's also where healing begins. I started going to therapy. At first, I hated it. I hated talking about him, hated remembering how small I'd become. But every week, my therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Patel, helped me peel back another layer of pain. One day, she asked, "Do you think he broke you, or do you think he revealed where you were already cracked?" That question sat with me for weeks. Because she was right, Lucas hadn't created my insecurities. He'd only found them and used them as mirrors. I began rebuilding, slowly, deliberately. I started jogging at dawn, the hour when the city still slept and the world belonged only to the stubborn and the lost. I bought myself flowers every Friday. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed away during the Lucas years. One night, I went to an open mic with my best friend Mia. She dragged me out of the house, claiming I needed noise therapy. Halfway through the event, I found myself smiling. The laughter around me felt real for the first time in months. When I got home that night, I played my old acoustic guitar, the one Lucas used to mock. My fingers were rusty, but the sound was soft and steady like breathing again after being underwater too long. 8 months passed. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, everything changed again. I was in a small bookstore downtown browsing the philosophy section, something I hadn't done in years. My hand hovered over a copy of Beyond Good and Evil when a voice behind me said, "Be careful." That book made me want to throw it out the window. I turned. A man stood there, messy hair, gentle smile eyes that looked curious instead of calculating. "You've read it?" I asked. Tried to, failed gloriously. I laughed, and it surprised me how natural it felt. We talked for almost 2 hours about books, travel, childhood, everything. His name was Patrick. He was a civil engineer who built community centers and bridges for a living, literally making connections. When I told him I worked in publishing, he said, "So you make the world sound better, and I just make sure it doesn't collapse." He wasn't trying to impress me. He was trying to know me. And for the first time, that was enough. That night, I sat by my window holding a cup of tea, thinking about him. I realized something simple, something I wish I'd known years earlier. Love isn't supposed to make you feel like you're walking on eggshells. It's supposed to make you feel like coming home. I didn't know it then, but meeting Patrick wasn't an accident. It was the universe's quiet way of saying, "Now that you've learned what love isn't, let me show you what it could be." Love didn't rush back into my life. It tiptoed. Patrick and I started as friends. There was no spark that burned too bright, no dizzying chaos like with Lucas. Just peace. And that I realized was rarer than passion. He texted occasionally, book recommendations, random jokes, photos of bridges he'd designed. I'd reply with sarcastic comments or quotes from novels. It was easy, natural. A month later, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee. He showed up 5 minutes early with 2 drinks in hand. I didn't know what you liked, so I guessed. Vanilla latte, right? How did you... You look like someone who finds comfort in the familiar. That line stayed with me for weeks. Not because it was romantic, but because it was true. We saw each other more after that. Farmers markets, art exhibits, long walks through the city. He'd tell me about growing up with 3 brothers. I'd tell him about being an only child with too many books and a mother who collected seashells. He listened, really listened. The first time I told him about Lucas, not in detail. Just the broad strokes. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. He just said quietly, "I'm sorry he made you question your worth." No grand gestures, no promises. Just empathy. It was strange how healing could sound like silence instead of speeches. One rainy afternoon, we ended up stuck inside a small diner during a thunderstorm. Patrick stirred his coffee, watching lightning flash through the windows. "You ever think about the future?" he asked. I laughed softly. "After the last few years." "Not really. I'm kind of figuring out who I am again." He smiled. "Good. That means you're not rushing. The right things don't need chasing." Then quietly, almost like an afterthought, "For what it's worth, I think you'd make an incredible mom someday." The world seemed to go still. My breath caught. The last time someone had talked about me being a mother, it ended with cruelty. This time the words felt like sunlight after a storm. I didn't respond right away. Just looked at him. He didn't flinch, didn't retract what he said. He just smiled, gentle and patient, letting me sit with it. That was the moment something inside me began to thaw. Months passed. What started as casual companionship turned into something deeper, an affection that grew in the quiet, in the small details. Patrick always remembered the things I never said twice. He'd text, "Remember to eat before editing marathons," or show up with chamomile tea when I was overwhelmed. He wasn't the kind of man who swept you off your feet. He was the kind who made sure you landed safely. And maybe that's what I'd needed all along. One weekend, he invited me to help babysit his niece and nephew, 2 tiny whirlwinds named Max and Sophie. We spent the afternoon building pillow forts and eating ice cream straight from the tub. At one point, Max fell asleep in my lap, and I caught Patrick watching me. Not with amusement, but with something softer, deeper. "You're really good with them," he said quietly. I smiled, brushing Max's hair off his forehead. "Kids are honest. You can't fake love with them." Patrick nodded. "That's what I like about you. You don't fake anything." That night, as we cleaned up the mountain of toys, he turned to me suddenly. "You know, I think love is a bit like parenting. You show up, you listen, you keep showing up even on the hard days." It wasn't a confession, but it felt like one. We didn't label things right away, but love has its own rhythm. It doesn't need permission to grow. 3 months later, he officially asked me to be his girlfriend. We were sitting in the park, the air thick with the smell of jasmine and rain. He looked nervous. I teased him. "Patrick, you build bridges for a living. I think you can handle asking a question." He laughed. Then softly, "Kelly, will you build one with me?" That was the first time I realized he wasn't offering me escape. He was offering partnership. 6 months later, he proposed. No fancy dinner, no fireworks, just a quiet hike up our favorite hill. The wind tangled my hair as he held out a simple ring. "No speeches," he said, smiling. "Just this, will you marry me?" I didn't even let him finish the sentence before whispering, "Yes." Our wedding was small. My parents, his family, a few close friends. I remember standing there holding his hands thinking, "This is what safety feels like?" During the vows, he said, "You've taught me that love isn't loud, it's consistent." And I knew then that I'd never have to beg to be understood again. We moved into a small house with creaky floors and a backyard big enough for dreams. We painted the walls together, argued over curtain colors, laughed until midnight over burnt pasta. One night lying in bed, he asked, "Do you ever think about kids?" I hesitated, old fears bubbling up, but then I saw his expression. Not pressure, not expectation, just curiosity. "Yes," I whispered. "I always have." He smiled. "Good, because I can't wait to meet them someday." That was the moment the past lost its power over me. Because someone finally looked at me and saw not a burden, not suburban mediocrity, but a woman worthy of love and legacy. I fell asleep that night with his arm draped across me and a thought that felt like a promise. Maybe love doesn't need to burn. Maybe it just needs to stay. When I found out I was pregnant, I cried, not because I was scared, but because it felt like the world was finally giving me back everything I thought I'd lost. I still remember the moment the faint pink line on the test, my trembling hands. The sound of the clock ticking too loudly in the bathroom. Patrick was outside watering the plants. I walked out, barely breathing, holding the test behind my back. He turned, smiling. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," I whispered. "A miracle." When I showed him the test, he froze for half a second, then laughed a sound so full of joy it made my knees weak. He lifted me into his arms, spinning me around like we were kids. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He laughed and cried at the same time, and I realized then this was what love looked like when it was real. Pregnancy changed everything. Patrick went to every appointment, asked the doctor. Too many questions, read parenting books before bed. He'd put his ear on my belly every night and talk to the baby. "Hey, little one, this is your dad. I hope you like bad jokes." I'd laugh and say he or she's probably already rolling their eyes. When we painted the nursery, we argued over shades of yellow. He wanted sunrise gold. I said soft butter. We compromised with something in between. The walls glowed like morning light. We took birthing classes, practiced breathing, and joked about how unprepared we probably were. But underneath it all was a kind of peace, a shared certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. When our son was born, I thought I understood love. But then I saw him tiny, red-faced, crying, like his lungs were too small to hold all that life, and my heart cracked open wider than I knew it could. Patrick cut the cord, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," he whispered. "He's perfect, Kelly." We named him Leo after my grandfather, but also because it means brave. It felt right he was our new beginning, our courage made flesh. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I thought about the night Lucas told me he'd rather die than have my children. For a moment, I saw his face in my memory, the sneer, the disgust, and then I looked down at Leo, warm and blinking up at me, and I realized how wrong Lucas had been. Because this tiny heartbeat pressed against my chest was the most beautiful thing I'd ever made. "You were wrong," I whispered to the ghost of him. "You'll never know what this feels like." The months that followed were exhausting and euphoric. We survived sleepless nights, diaper disasters, and colic cries. But Patrick never complained. He'd wake up at 3 a.m., stumble to the crib, and whisper stories to Leo about the constellations, about bridges and bravery. Sometimes I'd wake up and find them both asleep in the rocking chair. Patrick's head tilted back, Leo's tiny hand resting on his chest. Those were the moments I wished I could freeze forever. One afternoon when Leo was 6 months old, I got a message request on Facebook. The name made my heart stop. Lucas Matthews. I hadn't seen it in years. I thought he'd disappeared from my world for good. The message was short. "Congratulations. I heard you had a baby. He's beautiful. Hope you're well." I stared at it for a long time. The words were polite, harmless. But underneath, I could feel the weight of something else, nostalgia, maybe regret. I didn't respond. I blocked the account. But that night, as I rocked Leo to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why now? After 4 years. After all the silence. It wasn't guilt that rose in me. It was pity. For someone who only realized the value of love after it was gone. A few weeks later, my friend Mia called. "You'll never guess who I ran into," she said. "Don't tell me Lucas. He asked about you. Said he heard you got married, had a baby. He looked different, kind of lost." I didn't know what to say. Mia continued. "He said he's trying to start a family now, but it hasn't been easy." The words hung there between us. For a long moment, I said nothing. I hope he finds what he's looking for, I finally said. You don't sound angry. I'm not. He gave me the map to the life I was meant to build by showing me what I didn't deserve. One evening, Patrick caught me standing in the nursery staring at Leo sleeping in his crib. You okay? He asked. Yeah, just thinking. About him. I looked up surprised. How did you... He smiled softly. You get quiet when your past tries to talk. I nodded. He reached out. I didn't reply. Patrick came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Good, because the only people who matter are already right here. I turned and kissed him, feeling Leo's soft breaths fill the silence. He was right. My life wasn't missing anything. But peace is fragile, and some ghosts don't like to stay buried. A month later, while grocery shopping with Leo, I heard someone call my name. Kelly. My blood ran cold. I turned and there he was. Lucas. Older, thinner, dressed too neatly, as if trying to armor himself in confidence. It's been a while, he said, forcing a smile. Yes, it has. His eyes fell on Leo, sitting in the cart, babbling and chewing on his toy giraffe. Is this your son? Yes, his name's Leo. He swallowed hard. He's beautiful. He looks like you. For a moment, I thought he might mean it kindly, but then I saw something flicker behind his eyes: regret, envy, loss. Thank you, I said simply. We stood there in awkward silence, surrounded by cereal boxes and checkout beeps. Finally, he said quietly, I'm trying to have kids now. It's been hard. I nodded politely. I'm sorry to hear that. And I meant it, but I didn't offer comfort or friendship or closure. Some stories don't need rewriting, they just need to end. Take care, Lucas. I pushed the cart forward. Leo laughed, waving his little hand at the man who once said he didn't deserve to exist. I smiled to myself and whispered, Yes, sweetheart, you're right. We don't look back. The day at the grocery store should have been the end, but endings have a way of finding cracks to slip through. A few weeks later, Patrick and I were invited to a summer barbecue at Mia's place, an afternoon filled with laughter, old friends, and Leo toddling around the yard, his cheeks pink from the sun. I was carrying plates to the table when Mia caught my wrist, her smile tightening. Kelly, don't freak out. Okay, what's wrong? Someone showed up with a date. You might want to brace yourself. I didn't need to ask who. I turned and there he was. Lucas. He was standing across the yard talking to someone from the group. He looked different. Softer maybe, but not in a good way. His eyes carried a weight I hadn't seen before, like someone who'd finally realized he couldn't outrun loneliness. He saw me. His smile froze halfway, then rearranged itself into something polite. Too polite. He walked over, careful, cautious. Kelly. Wow. You look good. Thank you. His gaze shifted to Leo, who was playing with Patrick near the grill. That's your little boy, yes. That's Leo. Patrick noticed us, gave a small wave, and walked over. His expression was calm but protective, the quiet kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice to set boundaries. Hey, Patrick said, extending his hand. You must be Lucas. I've heard your name before. Lucas hesitated, then shook it. Yeah, old history. Ancient history, I added softly. Patrick smiled at me, then excused himself to take Leo to the sandbox. That left Lucas and me standing under the shade of the oak tree, the air heavy with things unsaid. He looked down, then said quietly, You really seem happy. I am. I've been thinking about us lately, about what I said back then. I stayed silent. I was stupid, Kelly. I was young, selfish. I thought wanting more meant never settling down. But I see you now, your family, your little boy, and I realize that's the more I was chasing all along. I looked at him, then really looked. The arrogance was gone. What replaced it was hollow. You said you'd rather die than have my children, I said softly. Those words don't fade just because you wish they would. He winced. I didn't mean it. I was scared. You wanted a future I wasn't ready for. You weren't scared, Lucas. You were cruel. There's a difference. He swallowed hard, voice trembling. I've changed. Maybe you have. But the woman you broke back then, she changed too. And she doesn't exist anymore. I turned to leave, but he caught my arm gently, not forcefully. His voice cracked. Do you ever miss what we had? I didn't even hesitate. No. He blinked as if he'd expected at least a hint of nostalgia. What we had wasn't love, I continued. It was me trying to prove I was enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. He stepped back, looking away. The sound of laughter from across the yard felt like another world. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, he whispered. Then say it and let it be enough. He nodded, eyes glistening. But as I walked away, I knew it wouldn't end there. Some people mistake guilt for love, and guilt always wants an audience. Later that night, as Patrick and I packed up Leo's toys, I told him what happened. He didn't look angry, just thoughtful. You okay? Yeah, just drained. He apologized. Good. But you know he's not really saying sorry for you. He's saying it for himself. I know. He leaned over and kissed my forehead. That's the thing about the past, Kelly. It shows up when it realizes it doesn't belong anywhere else. I smiled faintly. That's poetic. Been reading my books again. Just stealing your lines, he teased. But I was right, it wasn't over. 2 weeks later, I saw a familiar car parked across from our house. Same make, same color. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. But it happened again. Different days, different hours. Patrick noticed. You think it's him? I don't know. We didn't confront him. We didn't need to. Some ghosts disappear faster when they realize they're not being chased. Still, something in me stirred. That old ache, the feeling of being watched, judged. I'd worked so hard to bury it, but Lucas's presence, even from a distance, made it twitch again. Then came Leo's first birthday. The day everything came full circle. We planned a small gathering at the community center near our house. Family, close friends, laughter echoing through the hall. Patrick was outside setting up the grill. I was arranging cupcakes shaped like tiny suns. For once, life felt perfectly ordinary, the kind of ordinary I used to dream about. Then I saw a familiar car pull into the parking lot, and the ghost stepped out again, this time holding a gift bag. Lucas. My hands froze over the cupcakes. Patrick noticed instantly. Do you want me to handle it? He asked softly. No, I said, my voice steady. This is mine to finish. I walked toward the door, my pulse steady, my mind quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel fear, just finality. He saw me and smiled that same nervous grin I'd seen the first time we met. Hi, Kelly. I brought something for Leo. You shouldn't be here. I just wanted to wish him happy birthday. He's 1-year-old Lucas. He doesn't know you, and I intend to keep it that way. His mask cracked. The exhaustion in his eyes told me he'd been rehearsing this moment, hoping for redemption. I know I hurt you, he said, voice breaking. But I've changed. I want the things you wanted. A family, a child, love. Then build it with someone else. No one wants me. I keep trying, but... He stopped, choking on the truth. I'm running out of time. I stared at him, at the man who once made me believe I was unworthy of love, and I realized how small he'd become. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said quietly, but that has nothing to do with me anymore. His eyes shimmered with tears. Kelly, please. I was an idiot. You were the one, the only person who ever actually loved me. No, Lucas, I loved who I thought you could become, but that man never existed. I turned toward the door. Goodbye, Lucas. Behind me, I heard his breath hitch the soft scrape of a shoe against gravel, but I didn't turn back. Because I had already faced my past, and I had nothing left to prove. I didn't look back as I walked toward the building. The sound of Lucas's car door slamming behind me felt like punctuation, a sharp period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. Inside, the air smelled of frosting and laughter. My mom was helping Patrick set up decorations while Leo babbled in his high chair, smearing icing on his cheeks like war paint. Patrick looked up as soon as he saw my face. Everything okay? I smiled, though my hands were still trembling faintly. Perfect, I said. And for once it was true. He came closer, brushing a stray hair from my face. He's gone. Yeah, probably for good this time. Patrick's hand lingered against my cheek. Then let's not waste another second thinking about him. I nodded. He was right. Lucas belonged to another lifetime, one I'd already buried and mourned. As the guests gathered, I caught myself watching Leo more than anyone else. The way he laughed when my dad blew bubbles, the way his tiny fingers grabbed frosting and offered it to me like a gift. It was in those small moments that everything I'd fought for made sense. I'd once begged someone to imagine a future with me. Now I was living inside one, and it was better than anything I'd dared to dream. Later that evening, after the candles were blown out and Leo had demolished his cake, the guests slowly trickled out. My mom kissed me on the forehead before leaving. You did good, sweetheart, she whispered. You built the life you deserve. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, Patrick and I sat on the floor, surrounded by wrapping paper, half-eaten cupcakes, and the faint hum of a lullaby from Leo's baby monitor. He glanced at me. You want to talk about what happened outside? I hesitated, then nodded. He said he's changed. Said he wants the things I have now. Patrick sighed, leaning back against the wall. People like him always want what they can't have, especially when they realize it was never about the things. It was about the heart behind them. He said he's running out of time. Patrick looked at me, his eyes soft but steady. Maybe he is, but that's not your burden to carry. I smiled faintly, my throat tight. I know. We cleaned up in silence, the kind that feels warm rather than awkward. Every few minutes, Patrick would hum some silly tune, and I'd laugh. The kind of laugh that comes easily when you're with someone who makes you feel safe. When the last dish was washed and the lights dimmed, I peeked into Leo's room. He was fast asleep, one hand clutching the little stuffed lion Patrick had bought the day he was born. I brushed a kiss on his forehead. "Sleep well, my brave boy." Behind me, Patrick leaned against the doorway, smiling. "You okay?" "Better than okay." He stepped closer, wrapping his arms around me. "You know," he whispered, watching you handle him today. "It reminded me how strong you are." I smiled. "I'm not strong, Patrick. I just got tired of breaking." He kissed the top of my head. "That's what strength is, Kelly." We walked back to the living room. The leftover cake sat on the table, candles half melted. I picked up one of the smaller ones and relit it, watching the flame flicker gently in the dark. "You know what I was thinking earlier," I said. That maybe we should give Leo a little brother or sister someday." Patrick blinked, surprised, then grinned. "Really? Really?" He pulled me close, his laughter low against my neck. "Well, I happen to love that idea." I laughed too, the kind of laughter that feels like sunlight. Much later that night, when the house was quiet and the world outside felt far away, I thought about Lucas one last time. Somewhere he was probably lying awake, replaying all the moments he couldn't fix, the ones that turned to dust, the moment he realized what he'd lost. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't even pity him. Because the truth was simple, he'd already served his purpose in my story. He was the lesson that led me here. I looked around our little home. The toys on the floor, the framed photos on the wall, the soft hum of the baby monitor, and realized that everything I'd ever wanted had quietly become my reality. Not through revenge, not through luck, but through choosing myself one day at a time. I reached for Patrick's hand under the blanket. He murmured sleepily, "What's on your mind?" "Nothing," I whispered, "just gratitude." He smiled without opening his eyes. "Good, keep it that way." I closed mine, letting the quiet settle around us like a promise. Some wounds don't heal because they disappear. They heal because you stop touching them. And as the night wrapped around us, I finally understood the best revenge is peace.